Thank you. I hope everybody enjoyed your lunch. Good afternoon. My name is Courtney Kibblewhite. Our business is Northern Broadcasting out of Eastern Montana. And I am the former board chair, so I was Nancy Slepp last year, but we're so excited to have you all here. Have to say, really appreciate the warm, open-hearted, open-minded conversations I've got to be a part of. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And I get the honor of introducing our guest speaker today. Her name is Mary Hannah Flor. And let me tell you a little bit about her background. So after graduating San Diego State University with a Bachelor of Science in Hospitality and Tourism Management, Mary has had an illustrious career, playing pivotal roles in the operating teams of renowned destinations such as the resort at Pelican Hill and the Mandarin Oriental Hotel Las Vegas. And during those experiences, Mary's fervor for training and development ignited. She has crafted and delivered materials geared towards elevating sales metrics and guest satisfaction. Mary's expertise lies in the art of translating a company's service standards from mere theory into actionable practices. When I saw that, I was like, hell yes, we can all come up ideas, but making action out of what those values, et cetera, are. Really excited to hear what she has to say. So get ready to be captivated by Mary's insights and energized by her infectious zeal for excellence. Everybody, this is Mary.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Mary Flor from Master Connection Associates, and I'm so thrilled to be here with all of these beautiful women today to talk to you a little bit about the path of goal setting and blazing your own trail. So a little bit about myself, a little bit more about myself and the organization I work for. So the organization I work for is called Master Connection Associates, and we do training in 3 key areas. So we train in customer service, sales, and leadership. And we also do a lot of consulting projects on organizational development. And we work in a variety of industries, from hospitality to banking to finance. And so because of that, and I've been working with the organization for over a decade now, this has allowed me to work with professionals from all over the world in order to help them carve their own path and look at their own blazing trails. So when I look at what are we going to talk about today, the first thing is we are going to talk about how do you blaze your own trail. And then once you think about what do you want out of life, then you got to think about, well, how do I set the goal and the path to actually getting there with effective action steps? The last thing then that we're going to talk about is a little bit about branding yourself on the West and how do you stand out from all of the masses of individuals that are out there. So let's create your own trail. So I always like to say, each and every single one of you, you have your own unique talents, you have your own dreams, and you have your own aspirations. And as I said, this is about thinking about what is the path that I want to take to carve out my own legacy. So even when you look at International Women's Day, it started in 1908 when a group of women from New York City actually protested child labor laws, the sweat laws, all of those kind of laws, all the poor working conditions that women had to face back in the 1900s. And if you think about that, what a legacy did they leave behind? So what are we going to talk about is how do you create your own future? How do you create your own legacy? And what I find when I do a lot of personal coaching, one-on-one coaching with people that are brand new in their career, all the way up to C-level executives, is a lot of people know what they want, but they have no idea how to actually get there. So when you think about being a pioneers, one thing about pioneers is they did well with adversity. And so some of the conversations that I heard this morning is that women in general, we have to get better at sometimes dealing with adversity, whether it's in the business or, getting on the ballot. And when I look at pioneers were visionaries. They dreamt really big. And I'm reading a book right now, and it's about dreaming big. So this individual, the writer of the book, he's saying that if you want to make $100,000 and that's your goal, you should just make it $1 million. So then that way, you're dreaming big, you're going after those big dreams, but then when you actually just make $500,000, you're actually really quite happy with that. The other thing, which is kind of quite fun, is thinking about you personally. What are all the opportunities that you have, one, in your life, but also to change your industry? So even as I sit around here and look at all of you, and I was talking with this table over here, so they're giving me some good content. And they are all 4 of those ladies right over there. They can raise their hands. They're all from 4 different cities and said, we're sitting with 4 different people that we don't know. And there's so many opportunities to network, to meet people. And so we got to think about, how do you also embrace change? What I find is that a lot of people, they don't like change. Human beings don't like change because we don't like uncertainty. And when I look at uncertainty, that's not a good thing. We got to get better at embracing change and being those trailblazers. The other thing when I look at change, I always make a joke. So for example, if you don't like change, just look at what you wore 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Look back to the 80s and you're like, why was I wearing that? So change is actually a really, really good thing. And our goal, and my goal, is to have you think a little bit about how can you live a life of purpose and fulfillment. And what that means is you got to really think about what personally sets you on fire. So when I look at myself and what personally sets me on fire, what sets me on fire, like I'm a sales trainer. Like I love sales, I love prospecting, I love meeting new people, but most importantly what I love, because I'm a trainer mostly, is helping people get better at their jobs so they can be more successful, so they can get those job promotions, and that's what sets me on fire. And what that means is when it's been a long day, or when you're tired, or when you don't want to, if you're committed to your goals and you have that unwavering determination, well, then it's a lot easier to kind of succeed because you're actually passionate about what it is that you actually do. And you cannot actually have that unwavering determination, though, if you surround yourself with what I say are energy suckers. So if you know anybody that's like, I use my own name, the Miserable Mary, like, you can't be the miserable Mary. I always like to say, when you walk into a room, you got to make sure that that energy uplifts, right? And you got to surround yourself with people that actually uplift you and that do embrace all of that positivity there. Now, there's always going to be good days and bad days, but I don't know if anybody ever read anything about venting before? Venting at all? Venting is actually one of the worst things for like your own mental state, because all that venting does is drain the energy out of you, and it's not being solution oriented. So you got to think about, how do I take on these problems head on? And that's where, as I said, you got to surround yourself with positive people. And I like to talk about positive stress, because we've even heard this morning that there's a lot of burnout that's happening for women just in general. And when I look at the burnout and I look at positive stress, I like to say I have a lot of positive stress. Positive stress is that, you're hopping on a plane tonight to get home. I have family that's staying with me for 2 weeks. 2 weeks, that's a long time. I don't know, maybe it's like 2.5 weeks, okay? That's just a long time. I'll just leave it at that. But it's positive stress. Positive stress was last week. I was in Dulles Airport and I was sprinting. I got the text from the airline that basically said, you're probably going to miss your flight because it's going to take you 30 minutes to get from your gate, and the plane was taken off in 12 minutes. So I sprinted like a crazy person, because this is what you do. I sprinted like a crazy person. They're announcing my name, going, Mary Flor, are you in the boarding area? We're closing the door. And I'm running down the airport screaming, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And then the lady goes, wow, you made it. It said it was going to take you 30 minutes to get here. She goes, you did it in 12. And then she gave me a high five. I was like, thank you. I appreciate that. That's what I call positive stress. Positive stress is good for you to have some of that, but you got to fuel that to use your energy. So at the end of the day, you are the author of your own story. You're the writer of your own book. And so you got to think about, how do I chart a course that is completely unique to me? So the name of this conference is to blaze trails. And I started to look up, what does it mean to actually blaze a trail? And I actually am, I'm a pretty avid hiker, but every single time you say you're a hiker, somebody else is like, well, have you hiked, 20 billion zillion miles? But I'm more of I hiked 8 miles last week. I thought that was pretty good. Not by choice. We went the wrong way. So what does it mean to actually blaze a trail? It's to be the first one to do something and to show others how to do it. So the lieutenant governor this morning talked a little bit about being a mentor and then being a mentee. I like to say, in this room, this is why I love these 4 ladies from 4 different places, you're carving out these relationships where these individuals can be your mentors, but then we also got to get better at menteeing some of the younger generation and building people up. And as women, we got to get really good at showing people how to do things, other women how to do things. And I find sometimes in business, when I was very young in my career, 22 years old, it's your first job out of college, I worked in a department that had all male bosses, and then there was one other female. This is just how it is, right? And she was always in competition with me. I don't want to be in competition. We got to be in co-opetition. It's okay to have a little competition. I'm very competitive. My mother tells me, you're not in a competition with your husband. I said, every day is a competition with my husband. Of course, I want to win. But you have to remember that it's co-opetition, right? And so that means we got to get better at showing people the path and showing them the way. Now, when you look at blazing a trail, me and my husband, we went to Maine. And we hiked Arcadia National Park. We were with some friends of ours. And we did the famous Beehive Trail. I don't know if anybody's been there. It's like a famous trail to do. So my husband goes, well, I want to take the very technical way up the mountain. So where you got to use the ropes, you got to like steep steps. It's like a little kind of scary. Our friends were like, we want to take the less technical approach. It's like the slow and easy up the mountain. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which approach you take. If you go straight up or you take the slow and easy, because you still get to the top of the mountain. And so that's where you got to think about what are the different paths that you can take, but there's multiple ways to get to the top. Now, when you are going on different paths, there's different vantage points. There's different views, but then there's also just different opportunities as you kind of go through each of those different paths. But at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself again, what is your legacy and are people going to want to follow you? Because you can blaze the trail, but if nobody's following behind you, what happens? The trail gets overgrown. So when I think about all of this, the journey is going to be tough. You know, the journey is there is going to be a lot of speed bumps. But I like to talk about even when people say, like, oh, you're just so lucky. I bring this up. So people like friends of mine, you know, they're like, oh my gosh, Mary, you're just so lucky. You got the nice house. You get to travel a lot for work. I like to travel a lot personally. You're just so lucky. I go, well, luck has nothing to do with it. I've busted my butt like my entire life. Never ever took a break from working, always was constantly working, and nobody sees when you're up early, staying up late, working on a Sunday or a Saturday. So success is actually hard. Change is actually hard. And confident people know that they got to work for it. And now is the time for you to think about, how do I invest more in myself? But what happens with women, and we heard this morning with Chef. Is Chef still here? I don't see her. Okay. We heard this with Chef this morning, that females in general have a lot more limiting thoughts than males, just period. So she talked about, well, I can never do a keynote speech. I can never raise as much money. I can never do this. I'm never going to be able to be that successful. I'm never going to get in the C-suite. And what you got to do is you have to imagine a world that if you had all the money, all the time, all the energy, what would you want to go after and achieve? And you got to rid yourself of all of those limiting thoughts because you're going backwards. So I mentioned earlier, I do travel a lot for work. And I have the ability, I get to work with women and men, all sorts across all different levels. And I was at a conference about 3 weeks ago. And a vice president of HR, there's about 50 people in the room. We were doing some training. 75% of the room was female, 25% was male. And she said that one thing is, and I just heard this in the Art of the Negotiation class, is that if you're a female, oftentimes we don't say, I want that job, I want to be in the C-suite, this is what I want. And this vice president of HR said, if nobody knows what you want, nobody knows what your goals are, whether that's personally or professionally, like even in your personal life, if you just want to buy a home, you got to share that with the world because then people will hold you accountable to that, right? So when I think about that, she said, you know, you got to make sure that your goals are known. But she shared a really interesting fact. She said that if a male has 30% of job qualifications for a job, they apply for it. Females feel they need 75% of the job qualifications to apply. Now, when I shared this statistic with my sister-in-law that's staying with me right now, okay, for the 2.5 weeks, so we've had lots of times to chat. If you know, yeah. She just had a baby. The baby's like almost 2, year and a half. She's trying to re-enter the workforce. And so I shared this statistic with her. And she said to me, I feel like I need 100% of the job qualifications. So how do you actually get onto that path to think about what do you want to go after and achieve? Because the freedom is actually to be you. But one thing is you got to learn how to actually hit your targets because you can't hit a target that you actually can't see. And I think that's really the key is how do we put together a really successful plan of action to achieving your goals? The other thing when it comes to goal setting, I've done a lot of research on goal setting, that when you have goals that are big and robust, you actually have higher self-esteem. When I was dating somebody once, kind of funny story, it was the new year. I asked him, I said, so what are your goals for the new year? And this gentleman I was dating said, I don't really do the New Year's resolution thing. I don't have goals. I dumped him the next day. And I'm not kidding you. It was literally the next day. So because he didn't have a lot of self-esteem, right? He wasn't necessarily keeping his eye on his prize. He was confined by his own limiting thoughts. So that same year, one of my nephews, he was 4 years old, and I said, so his name's Jack. I have 20 nephews, by the way, but one of them, I said, so Jack, you're 4 years old. What is your goals for the next year? He said, well, Aunt Mary, and he's 4 years old, he can barely even talk. I want to swim with the big kids in the big pool by summertime. That's a good goal. And so one thing that I heard back in the art of the negotiation, because I want to tie in some of the things that I heard this morning, is that goal setting starts at a very young age, and about the age of 8. So if you were in that art of negotiating breakout, they just said at the age of 8 is when really the females make a turn. So we have to be better, I think, even as women, of asking our children, especially when they're very young, what are your goals? Even if it's to do a puzzle. I love puzzles, by the way. But even if it's to do a puzzle, if it's to complete anything, even something in school, even when they're 3, 4 years old, that leads to high aspirations and very high self-esteem. So how do you put together a successful goal plan and create a strategic plan for your life? There's 3 steps. The first is you got to define the SMART goal and objective. Then you got to define what is your strategy to achieve that goal and what are all of the action steps that you need to take in order to be successful. So I like to think of, now I should mention this. I just said, now imagine a world that if you had all the time, all the money, all the energy, what would you want? But at the end of the day, you can only do so much. So you want to follow what I call the 3-goal process. You have three goals in a day that are short term. You have 3 goals in a week. You have 3 goals, big goals for the year, and then 3 lifetime goals. I also like to talk about goal setting in terms of habit goals versus long-term goals. See, a habit goal is I want to go to the gym 3 times a week for 30 minutes. The long-term goal might be, well, I want to run a marathon, by the end of the year. So there's a difference between habit goals as well as long-term goals. But you got to think about, how do I put the pen to the paper in order to think about what do I want out of my life? So the SMART goal process is really looking, and people have different definitions for SMART. It's specific, measurable, aggressive, realistic, and time-specific. What you can't have, though, is you can't have a wish. And what I find is sometimes females, we just make a wish. Sometimes we're like, well, I hope one day I can buy a home. That's just a wish then. So you got to think about, how do I quantify it? How do I really be very specific? How do I be measurable and attach the time to it? So here are some examples. You may want to buy a home by a certain day. You may have that goal of going to the gym. But then it may be, I want to generate a certain amount of revenue for my business. It may be, I want to get my name onto the ballot by a certain kind of time. I may want to become a manager. Maybe you're young in your career. I want to become a manager and move up the corporate ladder. I put in for chef. Book 15 keynote speeches by the end of the year, because she actually did a really phenomenal job. So you're thinking about setting those quantifiable goals. Now, when I look at goals, you got to be very specific. You got to define what you want. And I love this quote by Albert Einstein that's at the bottom. Because if you can't even explain what you want and you can't explain it simply, then you don't actually know it well enough. So most people, they don't set goals, they just talk about their goals. You got to think about, what do I want to achieve in my life and in the year and in the next week? And after that, you define the strategy. See, the strategy answers the question, how am I going to achieve this goal? And usually, you only have one strategy. You don't have 50 billion strategies. It's the big course of action. And I'll just go back. I like to use simple examples. So maybe your goal is, let's go with losing weight, for example. You want to lose 10 pounds in the next 3 months. You can have many different strategies. You can hire a personal trainer. You can get a nutritionist. You can go do Jenny Craig online. You could, I don't know, get your mouth wired shut, something like that. Eat only juices or something. So diet better. But you're not probably going to get a nutritionist And then also join Jenny Craig because they're counterintuitive. So you got to think about what's that big picture action of how am I going to achieve the goal, which is putting together a really solidified plan. So when you look at the definition of strategy, all a definition of strategy is putting together a carefully devised plan of action. Now, when you think about strategy, you got to be thinking downboard thinking. Let me ask you, who in this room plays chess? Anybody in this room play chess? Like, raise your hand high. Because then you can play. How many of you play checkers? Raise your hand if you play checkers. Yeah, everybody plays checkers, right? So during the pandemic, when there was nothing to do, my husband tried to teach me how to play chess. He's actually a really good chess player. I had a notebook I was writing down notes in because I couldn't even remember what was the difference between the rook or the king and the queen. I couldn't even get the names of the pieces down. And why don't people like to play chess? Because there was very few people that raised their hand. It's because in chess, if you ever watch the Queen's Gambit, your first move affects your next move and your next move and your next move. And in business, that's how you have to play. So I like to talk about, even me personally, why do we all like to play checkers? It's easy. First of all, you can have a glass of wine when you play checkers because you don't have to think that hard. Then it's if I'm playing Courtney, she makes a move, I make a move. It's very, very simple. You can't think of your life like that. You got to be thinking 2, 3, 4, 5 moves down the road and be very purposeful and calculate and deliberate in everything that you're doing. So here are example strategies. You may want to get a speaking coach if you want to do more speaking. You may have to leverage your existing contacts, get better at asking for referrals, for example. You may want to shift share from the competition. You may want to look at how do I create packages to drive revenue, depending on what your actual goal is. And then you got to determine all of your action steps. What are the to-do list? And the more specific you get with your to-do list, the better. Because one thing is, if your first to-do list of losing weight is to do research on personal trainers, you got to set a date and time that you're going to do that. And then you got to plug that into your calendar, whatever calendar you use, and actually hold yourself accountable to do that to-do list. So when I look at that to-do list, oftentimes there's also other people involved. You need other partners, sometimes you need friends, sometimes you need family members. It just depends there. But everything that you need to do to get to that goal. And I like to say you have to be very, very specific with those to-do items. So all of a sudden, those to-do items don't just keep rolling over and rolling over and rolling over. And this is about taking action. See, I know a lot of professionals out there. They have action with no vision. These are people that are so busy. How many of you would say you're so busy? Just raise your hand, everybody's so busy. But you have no idea where you may be going. So I was working, doing some one-on-one coaching with an individual, and she goes, I'm just so busy. She had 2 pop-up meetings that happened, then she had to get out a proposal, then she has to do this, do this, but she has no vision of where she's going, just action, action, action. Then there's people out there that have great vision, but they don't actually do anything. So it's they have the wonderful vision. So they're I know where I want to go. They know what my goals are, but they don't make any action steps to actually achieve them. They just talk about it. So in order to be successful, I say personally and professionally, you got to think about what is the vision of where I want to go mixed in with those action steps in order to be successful. And so there's many examples of action steps. It is the researching, the connecting on LinkedIn, it's networking, meeting with customers, whatever those action steps are for you personally. Now, I'm a firm believer that if you write everything down, a lot of people have their goals up here. And even if you don't want to write things down, just you could type it into a Word document and print it out. Because you got to see your goals every single day. If you're not seeing your goals, then you don't keep the eye on the prize. And we know, this is where vision boards, has anybody ever done a vision board before? Yeah, it's really quite fun, I have to say. But why are vision boards so important? Because you're seeing what you want out of life every day. So I have a notebook that I've kept all my goals in since 2014. So it's been about 10 years. And I love to flip back and go, this is what I achieved. There's things that you don't achieve. I did want to run the marathon, and then I hurt my back, and so that kind of ruined it. But if you reflect back on that every year, you will be amazed at what you actually achieved. And I wrote down what was the salary I wanted, the home I wanted, even some of those personal things, as well as all my professional goals. And here you go, and you look 10 years later and go, oh my goodness, I hit 90% of those without even sometimes realizing it. So if you do want to make more money, I like to say you want to write it down. If you do want more time for yourself, you got to write it down. One thing that we know also from females, I just read this in LinkedIn, and this goes back to even to making money. That even if you have a spouse in your home and you make the same amount of money as that spouse, and your spouse would be a male in this case, that even if you make the same amount of financial income, the female still does more work within the home. They still clean the house, they still take care of the children, they still take care of the elderly. They do everything. And what do men do? They spend more time on leisure activities. So this is where if you do want more time for yourself, you got to think about how am I going to fit that all in? And that means I really got to look at how do I focus and prioritize. And focus, a lot of people think like I can't focus and I'm not good at focusing, when really focus, I like to say it's a muscle. So tomorrow, if I did want to go out and run a marathon, I would probably like pass out and not make it. Because you can't just go out and run a marathon. You got to train, you got to work on it. And that's what focus is also, it's a muscle. So when you think about that, don't become overwhelmed with what the day actually brings you. This is sometimes what happens. This is where the burnout comes in that we heard about in some of the breakouts, is that we're just getting so overwhelmed. So you just want to break it down step by step. Remember the 3-goal strategy. You create the action steps. You then come up with some strategies and think about everything that you need to do to be successful. And almost all of you said, I am really busy, but you can't let the busyness take you over. And that's really the key, that all of a sudden a week has passed, a month has passed, and now you've actually go, okay, great, I didn't do that. So now I'm behind the game, How many of you would say that your to-do list rolls over like every week? Anybody? It happens, right? It's okay if it happens, but that's because sometimes we lose track of time. See, what I find from a time management standpoint, most people are actually really good at managing their time. What you're not good at is understanding how long things take you. So we're actually a poor estimator of how long things take us to do. And that means, I would say too, if that's some of you, I would recommend you keep like a time log. I like to say, when you go into work, what did I do from 8 to 8:30? What did I do from 8:30 to 9? What did I do from 9 to 9:30? What I find is most people, they just answer their emails. And that becomes their to-do list. You got to shut down all of that noise in order to actually make sure that you're focusing on getting those things off of your to-do list. The other thing when it comes to focus, a human being, depending on what study you read, and now if you consider the younger generation. So the younger generation, they have an even harder time with focus because of all the cell phones, all the noise, all of those, all the things that they have out there. But it's called the Pomodoro effect, so you can look this up. It's an old time management study. It was done on an old school kitchen timer. That's why it's called Pomodoro, like what my mother had, And the longest a human being can focus is about 25 minutes, and then you need to take a break. So what is a popular thing right now? Everybody talks about grinding it out. People are like, let's just grind it out, just get it done. Actually, that's not good for you. You actually want to work on something for like 30 minutes, take a little 5-minute break, and then come back to focusing on what it is you need to accomplish. So the last topic then, and we talked about your legacy. And really, how do you create a legacy? And really thinking about how do you stand out in the West? And I like to say it's not so easy to stand out in the West. It's not easy to brand yourself. So when I look at personal branding, has anybody ever heard the term personal branding before? Yeah, very popular term today. When in fact the term personal branding was actually created in the 90s. And all a personal brand is it's the perception of how other people view you. And sometimes your perception of yourself is different than the perception of other people. Like right now I'm up here, I talk very loud, okay? I think that's a really good thing for my job. However, like when you're in church, my priest is like, man, I can hear you from like so far away, just coming in, okay? Not always a good thing. It's the perception of how people view you. So when you look at a personal brand, it's how do you influence the public perception. It's positioning yourself in an authority in your industry. So when you think about your legacy, you think about what you want your goals are. Not everybody wants to rise to the top and be the C-suite. Maybe your position of authority in your industry is you just want to be the best mother out there, or the best wife, or just the best sibling, or the best aunt or uncle. But that's positioning yourself still in an authority that I'm like a family person, or maybe in your community as somebody that volunteers. The other thing, though, is a personal brand elevates your credibility. So you can't fake it till you make it. You have to be your own authentic self. And what that does is it differentiates you from the competition. So when I look at personal branding, and there's lots of things when it comes to personal branding, a lot of personal branding comes through social media. And why do we talk about social media? Is there's a lot of people out there that go like, ugh, on social media. How many of you would say you're an ugh person? Like, don't really, yeah. It's okay. When you laugh loud, we know it's you. So I was on a call last week with somebody, and social media came up. And an individual, it was a male, that said, he said that. He went, ugh, I just don't like social media. Because everybody's trying to promote themselves. Everybody's really braggalocious. That was the word he used. I thought that was kind of funny. Nobody wants to work with anybody that brags about themselves, that they're like, I'm just the hottest, greatest thing. But you do have to think about, what do you want to be known for? So like I use myself. I mentioned at the beginning, I love sales training. I love prospecting. I love everything customer service. My personal passion is helping others succeed. Like that's what drives me. But on my LinkedIn profile, what do I post? About most people that follow me, about probably 50, 60% on LinkedIn, are salespeople. So every single Wednesday, I post like a prospecting tip, like a new business development tip. And it'll be like a stat, it'll be a reminder, how to write an email, how to create your list, just one little tip there. I will tell you, I'm not promoting. I'm not saying on my LinkedIn, contact me to do your sales training. I'm Mary. That wouldn't be real. But what that has done is it's taken something that I actually like to do, using my combination of my skills and experience and what I want the world to see in order to actually be more successful as a sales trainer. So I want to say about 2 to 3 times a month, I have somebody that reaches out to me and says, hi, Mary, can you come in and do like prospecting training? Can you come do some new business development training? And why are they asking me? Because I've stayed very top of mind when I meet people. So like I've stayed top of mind as a sales trainer. So that's how you show off your own uniqueness, your own specific selling points as an individual. So when I look at social media, if I connect with any of you in this room, and maybe we'll connect after this. I'm happy to follow anybody and like all of your things. If I connect with you, I'm going to remember you for the day because we just met. But if you never actually post anything, whether it's on Instagram, Facebook, or any social media, I'm not going to remember you. We meet so many people. So this is about how do I stay top of mind. The other thing when you look at building your business, if you're a business owner in here or you do even digital marketing, people follow people. When you meet somebody, they don't go on and follow your company. They follow the individual. This is why influencers have become so influential. Because if I like to hike, so if I follow a hiking influencer, I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy the shoes that female hiker tells me to buy, not the random friend necessarily that like hikes here and there. That's where influencers have become so over the top and so critical. So this is when you think about building on a reputation for what it is that you want to be. And you can use other examples. So my sister-in-law, I'll use her again because she's again been staying with me for 2.5 weeks. She loves cats. Okay, when I met her, I was like, she's a crazy cat lady, okay? People can be a crazy cat lady. She's delightful, and she has a newborn baby, and she loves doing, like, TikToks about her cats and the baby. So one of her TikToks actually went viral, which is kind of funny, where the cat, like the baby was sitting up. The baby is probably like 4 months old, just barely can even sit up. Maybe not 4 months, but maybe a little bit older. And the little cat came over to sniggle on the baby and knocked the baby over. It got like 2 million views on TikTok, okay? Now, showing off, I go back to showing off her skills and experience and her personality. That shows off her personality. The other thing is finding her uniqueness, her specialties. She just loves cats. So that she's showing that off to the world and building a reputation on cats. And now she's like a cat influencer on TikTok. Do you know how many things she gets sent to like promote on like cat combs, baby combs? She had a baby comb delivered. Like, oh, I got to do a TikTok video with the baby comb. And then I go, okay, she's maybe making a little bit of money off of this, but there's just another example where she took a passion. She took that she loves her cats. She's not trying to make a business out of it, but she loves her cat, she loves her child. Like, why not have a combination of both of that? And now she's built a reputation over the past 1.5 years with her baby and the cats of being very successful. So you can utilize that in different ways. So why is this important? Well, first of all, there's many benefits. See, if you think people aren't looking you up online, I guarantee you they are. I mean, Candace looked me up online. That's the only reason I'm here. So just saying, right? It came through a referral of why I should be here, and then Candace looked me up online. She checked me out. So everybody's looking at you online and going, why should I work with you? I like to talk about LinkedIn because that's the most professional way. But most people, how many of you use LinkedIn or look at LinkedIn to look at people? That's like, okay, so almost every single one of you. When people connect with me, I get people that connect with me every day. When I click back on their profile, I go, what do you do? Do you ever wonder, what does this person do? Why do they want to connect with me? It's because their profile isn't showing off. What are their skills? What are their expertise? So when people look back at your profile, it's got to be your elevator pitch. It's got to be why your company, why your organization, why your passion, whatever it is, why your community, and then a little bit about yourself. And I'll just use another example. So I was having some medical issues about 6 months ago. Things are kind of looking on the up and up, so don't have to be worried anymore. But I was supposed to go do like a keynote speech just like this for a client of ours. But it was an internal client. And I had to send in a colleague of mine to go do this training. Well, the vice president of this company that hired me, he looked up the other trainer that was going to go in and do the speech and said, I only have 3 mutual connections with this person. Are they even legit? And I laugh at that because this individual that came in to replace me for the speech, she actually has it more, her skills and experience aligned better with the objectives of what this company was looking for in a speaker than me. But because she didn't have that robust social media outlook, she wasn't taken as seriously. So people are looking you up online and they're going, what's it like to do business with you? And this opens up doors to job interviews, to promotions, to also staying, I like to say, very, very top of mind. And over here, this is my ladies over here, the 4 ladies, just to kind of bring them up again. Everybody's heard 6 degrees of separation. That means that everybody knows somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody that you want to be in contact with. But that table said in Montana, it's 3. Okay? So you got to think about if you want to build your business, if you want to get promoted, if you want to mentor, there's 230 mentors here, right here in your room. So that is where it opens up doors to relationships and job interviews. And you got to think about, what do I personally want to stand for? So when you look at social media, you look about branding you. It is the perception of what it is that you can actually bring to the table. Now, in conclusion, kind of as we wrap this up, I like to say, you got to stop the procrastination. So anybody read anything on like imposter syndrome at all? I don't know why this is such a thing for females, but imposter syndrome is where it's like, again, it's the limiting thoughts. It's like, I'm never going to be able to achieve this and to do this. And this is where, if you just stay in your lane, I like to say you're not trying to be braggalocious. You try to be humble. This is why I like the chef's story so well. Is she just got up there, was her authentic self going, I'm not the best speaker. I'm nervous about telling my story, which I get nervous telling my story too. Because you know when people go, what's your story? I'm like, I'm just a normal person. Like I'm just an average, normal person. But this is about stop procrastinating. It's called the momentum principle. What the momentum principle is, it's one step to the next step, and then it just snowballs into multiple steps. So when you think about kind of in conclusion, and you think about goal setting, you really got to think about what is the trail that you want to blaze? What is the legacy that you want to leave behind? Putting the pen to the paper of what are those goals that I want to set for myself, my business, my career, and my family, for my children, asking your children those goals, because the first step is really often the most difficult. But I like to say that one thing that you can do, whether you're so busy, you get so overwhelmed, is I do what I call a reverse to-do list. So if you ever end the day and you go, oh my gosh, I didn't get anything done that I wanted to do, I wasn't doing anything towards my goals, I like to write down what is everything that I did that day, and then I cross it off my list. Because, yeah, it's actually a proven fact that makes you feel better. It makes you feel better. It makes me feel better. Yeah, not on your list, to write it down and cross it off. But what it does is it helps you go, gosh, I actually did do a lot today. I didn't just sit around and do nothing. And even if because I heard earlier, even if your child is sick and you had to stay home with your child because they were sick. I just write on my to-do list, I just write down, I gave the baby a bath, and then I took the baby to the doctor, and then I did this. And it makes you feel accomplished. Because when you feel accomplished, that raises just your self-awareness and it raises that self-esteem. So I like to say, you want to do something for yourself every single day that moves you towards excellence and moves you towards your goals. So with that, I want to thank you all so much for having me. My commitment to all of you is that if you ever have a question or a challenge or you want me to look at your goals, help you go back through your goals, I'm happy to continue the conversation because I also, if anybody wants to be my mentor, I'll take some of that advice too. But back to the mentorship and being a mentor, the best thing to do is to share what are my goals, what do I want to accomplish with others that can help hold you accountable and to that standard. So I want to thank you all so much for all of your time and energy. I hope you have a great rest of your conference. Thanks for having me.